For those who you do not know me, my name is Christopher Branlin. I'm also known as the carnivore lawyer in the last couple of years because I've been helping out Dr. Chafee, but now I'm known as the carnivore lawyer running for Congress. But my background from carnivore goes till 2018 for the transition, but the couple years prior to that were a little bit more interesting. The reason is because that before I became an attorney, because I was licensed in 2011, I was a former competitive athlete as all trainer and an all-natural bodybuilder, and I did sprint triathlons during college and going into law school. So my best shape was I was Mr. Los Angeles Natural in 2010 when I got down to like a 3% body fat for the all-naturals, and I had a bodybuilding coach that trained with me, but he was a ketogenic doctor. So this is why I started drawing some more attention to keto. So that was in 2010, but I started practicing law for the first couple years, and I was still kind of going through my kind of like health weekends, I'd call it like that. You try to do something like an Ironman on a weekend. But in 2015, 2016, that's about the time where I started developing, I wasn't sure what kind of provoked it. It could have been stress, it could have been from traveling too much, but it could have been from probably developing sensitivities to a lot of different foods that many of you guys will expect if you guys get like a simple SIBO or kind of like a bacterial overgrowth. It was just discomfort. So I went to, and I think about the same time, let's say the autoimmune umbrella, where you have like one of every symptoms, like you have fibromyalgia, you have like chronic fatigue syndrome, and you can start adding things onto it. And I probably made the biggest mistake by I went to a conventional doctor who basically was a GI doctor and says, all right, we're going to give you a kind of a combination of different things. It was antibiotics, it was laxatives, and it was corticosteroids. For a whole year straight in 2016, and then in 2017, it just became intestinal discomfort to intestinal pain, where it started getting very inflamed at the bottom of my intestines. So in 2017, it got so bad where I was basically instead of a routine patient, I became a routine customer to try the different kind of pharmaceuticals, just completely incinerate your gut, regardless of how well you're trying to keto out of it. Because about this time, I still was eating plants. And I think when I tried to increase my plants when I was having the problems, it just got even worse. So I knew I couldn't trust the plants. But anyways, my biggest regret was when a piece of my intestine got so inflamed, they referred me to a colorectal surgeon and said, hey, you know what? This part of your intestine is very inflamed, and I'm almost positive you just remove this piece of your intestine, you're going to feel so much better. And when you're in so much pain and you're so desperate, you get very gullible. So a lot of people can probably recognize this too, is that, anything to just get me better, and you just agree to it. 2017, April 2017 specifically, I underwent the surgery like at 5 a.m., already in discomfort, but I'm not sure if they did any problems with the anesthesiologist or something, but I actually woke up as they were sewing up my intestines. I woke up prematurely. So it was at a very large hospital in Orange County, California, and even though it was a pretty large hospital, I can guarantee you that almost everybody in the hospital heard me scream. So if you're waking up as you're getting your intestines set open. So they had to drug me back up with a bunch of morphine, tramadol. You can kind of just add on everything they did to basically sedate me for like another 12 hours. And then I was just drugged up in the hospital. I couldn't even move because I had so much kind of restrictions, and as being an athlete, you're used to sit up out of bed really easily, and I just couldn't sit up. So I was already kind of having discomfort, and then they actually they're like, hey, we're going to release you. I'm like, well, it's been like 2 days. I want to make sure this thing's working. Is it safe to release? And they released me without checking if it's working. So about a week or two discomfort, let's just say I was going through where it felt like even worse than before the surgery. So I kept going back for complaints. I'm like, this is the most painful thing I've ever seen, and I had to be so sensitive. And even doing some intermittent fasting to help me out, it was just getting very painful. And I realized about 3 weeks later, the main anastomosis site, because laparoscopic intestinal surgery to remove 6 inches of your sigmoid, just laparoscopic in different areas, and then one main incision, 2 inches below the belly button, and that portion grew to almost the size of a grapefruit of an infection a couple weeks after the surgery. So I started complaining, and one of the physician's assistants said, "Oh, I think that's just a hematoma. It's going to go back down. It's normal." And I was like, "You're going to be kidding me." I want to try to watch my language because I'm an Italian attorney and I usually go out. But it got even worse where it got to the size of a grapefruit, and I sent a photo via email to the surgeon's office, and they said, "Get into the ER immediately." So I had to immediately go back to the hospital a couple weeks later. They had to cut me back open, and they said this is kind of emergency to get the infection out as fast as possible. They did not sedate me, so I felt the whole thing. They put some lidocaine injections around there, but they said, "Oh, we're going mainly superficial." No, they had to go to a very, very deep infection all the way down, and I was awake the entire time. So you can see, if you see me doing some adrenaline stuff lately, I have a really good pain tolerance now. So, because I've broken many bones in my body as an athlete, but I can tell you, getting your intestines cut open while you're awake, yeah, it's twice. So, and then it happened again a couple weeks later. It was mostly superficial, but they had to cut it open again. So I was basically trying to be so careful not to have any infections. It was mainly just meat and vegetables, really, at this point. But it got so bad where I ended up trying to do an elimination diet throughout the rest of 2017. And I think I had gotten to a point where I said, I'm just going to do a 10-day water fast. Just push it, just nothing but water for 10 days. I wasn't already a big guy. And I actually did 10 days of water, but as I was kind of planning on refeeding, I was looking more into the GAPS diet and bone broth. And I was like, let's just make this just a slow-cooked roast, basically, that I did on the refeeding, and that's where it triggered, where I started feeling better. Because a lot of you have done fasting, and you know that most of the fasting clinics in the US are run by vegans? I've went to some of those in the past. So after that, I started doing an elimination diet where I started refeeding what I can handle, and I was realizing that I was not reacting to any of the meats. It's just when I was adding the plants. And I was trying to okay, is it fruit versus vegetables? Is it the high oxalate diet or something? So I looked into Michaela Peterson. She was the first person I spoke with in 2018. And then I wanted to pick some more brains, so I contacted Dr. Baker. We did a Skype, September 2018. And then November 2018, I actually decided to go straight over to Budapest, Hungary on Thanksgiving Day from LA all the way to Budapest to stay with Dr. Sophia Clemens in her clinic, because I found out she's one of the creators of this meat-based diet when you think of it, because they were doing clinical trials of using a meat-based ketogenic diet to treat so many different autoimmune conditions. So a lot of people don't give it a lot of credit, but Dr. Clemens was one of the originators. So I stayed with them, and when I went over there, I conversed with, she looked at my past, she's like, all right, nothing but meat, fat, salt, and water, that's it. I was like, what about supplements? No supplements. Not even any vitamins, not even vitamin D, nothing. We do not allow any supplementation. You do just nothing but meat, fat, salt, and water. I'm like, what about the motility? And she's like, you're gonna eat plenty of fat. You're not gonna have a problem with motility. And she was completely right, by the way. Because if you ever went over, when they're no longer doing most of the clinical trials in person, they're doing most of the studies now. But when they have in-person treatment, basically where they go to these different clinics, they just supervise you eating nothing but 2 fatty animal-based meals a day. And even though I usually have a bad tolerance to pork, when I ate pork in Budapest, Hungary, it was amazing. But I found out it's because they're not feeding the pigs corn and soy. It's because they're feeding them, it's basically what they're feeding them. Anyways, I got so motivated when I came back to the United States, end of 2018, 2019, I want to kind of promote as a guy, as I get so much better. Now I just been eating meat and I'm like complete carnivore. It's like, I don't think I have to ever worry about a surgery again. I had to heal, but I don't think I'm ever gonna have this problem because if you ever get blocked up, just eat a bunch of fat. It's just so, it's the easiest, no medication. So I got off all these painful pharmaceuticals, and I was able to get off painkillers too, because that's something you take after surgeries, and especially in those conditions, right? So anyways, I made it a move to kind of promote carnivore, and I was mainly on LinkedIn for the past 14 years as part of the attorneys speaking out for the carnivores, basically, because I started speaking out for all of our local farmers. But what actually really kind of inspired me to kind of move to the congressional kind of like factor is that in 2020, 2021, the vaccine mandates became a huge ethical issue in California, with a lot of healthcare workers and government employees being forced to take the vaccine to keep their jobs. I thought it was a big ethical issue, so when I spoke out against that, as well as the mask mandates, people try to report me to the state bar because you're being the anti-vax attorney. So before I became known as a carnivore lawyer, I was probably known as the anti-vax lawyer or something like that. But so they tried to report me to the state bar twice, and I basically dismissed most of the claims because they kind of I showed them exactly what I stated, and I was free to my First Amendment rights to make that speech. So anyways, going on, it kind of motivated me to try to make a change at a congressional level, because I think more of our future doctors should be taught differently, and that's what I'm really admiring of the carnivore community, is using food to treat yourself as medicine, and you're seeing the whole Hippocratic Oath come into play too. So that's one of my movements, is to not only move everybody to a carnivore-based diet, but also to get people off harmful medications, especially some of these recent ones. So coming along, I made the change to get my PhD in public policy, because I wanted to have a little background or a little further higher education in just running local and larger governments. So I'm finishing off my PhD, and I've been working with Dr. Shafee for the past couple of years, and before I made my congressional announcement, I was already doing a podcast with him, and I told him I may consider running for Congress. But I made that decision at the end of 2024. I met some mutual colleagues that took me to inauguration, and at the Maha Ball to meet with Bobby Kennedy, which was my very first time, and Congressman Tom Massey. And that is my change, because not only do I want to make a huge focus on our healthcare, but I also want to focus on healthcare for our children, because I have nieces and nephews who are going through some really bad medical problems. So I have a lot of changes that are going to be made, but I had a very good podcast with Dr. Kiltz and Dr. Berry about whether it was futile to change the medical curriculum of all the medical schools, because it seems that it's based primarily on pharmacology now. Nothing about metabolic health, it's pharmacology and surgical procedures. So why is nutrition such a small, micro kind of element of the entire education given to our future doctors? Not sure if that's ever going to be changed, but pharmaceutical companies own, or they donate, the biggest donors for some of these medical institutions. There's a big influence. So I want to make some changes to that level, but I also want to see, since I'm getting my PhD, which is all based on clinical trials, you're researching qualitative and quantitative data. So you're doing surveys and you're doing markers. And I said, hey, Dr. Berry, if we can get some more federal funds going to clinical trials on natural ketogenic diets, versus to show the benefits to outweigh those of pharmaceuticals, would it be proper that we can get some federal funding for that? To see if we can get blood markers and surveys from people that have been on medications in a very standard American diet, versus going to off all medications and going to a ketogenic diet over the course of 30, 60, 90-day increments. Do you think federal funds should fund that type of research to show people that there's more clinical research showing the benefits of the ketogenic diet, especially animal-based ketogenic diet? So I have a lot of things I want to run in my policies, but I made the decision that I want to stick with this carnivore community as part of my campaign. So that's why you've seen me a lot of the recent meetups. I've been, I think this is my fourth Healing Humanity event that I've been to. I'm very honored. I'm very appreciative that Carrie and Adam are doing this documentary. So I think it's an awesome project. So I think some more attention and funds should be going. So expect some more funds coming from me too. And I'm open to any questions, and I'm looking forward to sharing this campaign with you guys.